What's happening? This is Skylar Davis, owner of Culture Shock Clothing and Records right here in Rockford, Illinois, and welcome to Vinyl Happy Hour. Every week we are bringing you different videos featuring some special limited indie store releases, some classic stuff, and I share some of my personal stories with you about some of my favorite records, and we talk a little bit more about what's interesting about what each release and what you can look forward to when you're shopping at your favorite local record store or hitting us up online at cultureshockshop.com. Big, exciting release, one of my classic favorite albums, which I actually didn't really care for when it came out when I was younger. Thought it sounded icky, but now it's one of my favorites, is Facelift from Alice in Chains. Their debut album. You would think such a huge band would have their stuff readily available on vinyl. But this came out in '90, which was a very dead zone for vinyl. And of course, a lot of CDs and cassettes were popular then, so that's been released. We have 3 other records to talk about, and then for my 5th one, I have a special guest musician who's going to be presenting his new album to us tonight on the show. But I do want to share one quick story about this album. Not only is it just a great classic grunge album, I like its darker overtones. It's finally getting released at a very affordable price. And I noticed they spread it out onto a double LP. It was very common in the 90s and stuff when vinyl wasn't the premium mode of music to squish a bunch of songs onto one LP, which the original one was, I think, on a single LP. The other really interesting fact about this album is that it never got a proper vinyl release for sale. It was only made as a promo copy for radio stations who were still playing vinyl. So that's pretty rare. I actually had a copy a while back and I sold it. They didn't even make artwork or a jacket for it. Very strange. So I can say that this actually sounds better. They spread it out. I mean, it's a slightly more annoying that you have fewer songs on each side of the record. So you gotta flip it more frequently, but I don't care. It sounds great. It's got a really dark sound to it. This is Alice in Chains, of course. We Die Young, Man in the Box, several other goodies. They came out with a great album here. So I'm glad to see it getting a proper vinyl release and at a really nice, affordable price. We'll move on from that, though. If you aren't already into that album, definitely pick it up. You're going to want to add that. Most of all the other Alice in Chains albums have been reissued. So you can find those. And that's going to be in our store and online at cultureshockshop.com. One tiny hint about my special guest musician, kind of. Well, I was trying to get a bourbon to drink with tonight, but this is black, and this is actually Metallica's whiskey, but they have black in the name of one of their best albums ever, and that's just the only hint I'll give you till we get to that. But this is an album from the band Hum. Oh my God, I haven't heard from them in forever. Inlet. This is a kind of a very overlooked 90s band. I don't know when the last time their album came out. They had an album out with the zebra on it in the 90s. This might be their first album in 15 to 20 years. They're an Illinois band, which is also really cool. They're on a smaller label, Earth Analog Records. If you haven't heard of Hum yet, definitely check them out. It's kind of shoegazy, post-rock, 90s sounding, and it still is. I definitely hear overtones of like Smashing Pumpkins for sure and some shoegaze bands. I even hear, like, strangely enough, some crunchy guitars of like 311 or something. But this is a great album. So cool to see a band that hasn't done something in a long time doing a really cool album. We have quite a few copies of these. Just talking about, I did want to preface this by saying when to buy records. When should you get a record? When should you spend money on it? When should you risk overpaying? This is a band that I don't think this may be in print very long. It's not a huge label. I would get it right when it comes out. Their older albums, they sometimes sell for $100, sometimes hundreds of dollars. They're supposed to be getting reissued. I don't know if and when they will, but I would get it right now. Whereas the Alice in Chains, getting an original facelift can be $300 to $500. So that's one where I would say wait until it gets reissued at an affordable price. And luckily, it has gotten reissued. So definitely check out the band Hum. This is Inlet. If you haven't heard of them, I think there's a lot of people who overlooked them. I didn't know who they were in the 90s. I was really into music like that. I found out about them so much later. And I'm just a huge record collector and a huge music nerd. I try to keep up with stuff. I was listening to a lot more probably new metal and hardcore and stuff at that time. Really cool. The next album that's coming out, man, this is just like every week. There's so many exciting things coming out between indie store exclusives and just stuff that I thought I would never see on vinyl again. The Social Network. This is the 10th anniversary of the soundtrack from this famous movie, and the music is done by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Of course, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. They did great packaging with this, and Trent Reznor has headed up doing the official remastering and even down to the details of the artwork. Very particular. The jacket is super nice. They did this as a triple gatefold with these like kind of lined out and kind of like oversaturized pictures and things like that. This movie definitely stands up on its own. It's a great movie actually, but the music on it is just so great. And I think a lot of those little sound effects and tracks that are very kind of Nine Inch Nails Fragile era-esque get lost and get forgotten in the soundtrack when you're watching the movie. So it's so nice to see them getting a full track release and actually just listening to this as if it were an album and not just a soundtrack. Because there's so many little parts of like that Nine Inch Nails sound that I love that was in the movie, but you obviously don't get to focus on the whole track or all the music. And it's a double LP, so you do get a large amount of music. But this is another one. 10 years ago when this came out in 2010, we had them for sale at Culture Shock. I didn't know they were going to go out of print or suddenly like go up in value, and they're like $300-400 sometimes just because of the rarity of it, and probably a lot of people didn't think it would ever get reissued again. So luckily it has. It's got a little note too. Oh, I forgot to mention, this thing actually comes with a really cool booklet. It would have been nice if I already had that out for you, but now I will. So it's got a really cool, this networking little booklet. It really goes into some really cool detail talking about Trent Reznor and him working with David Fincher, right? Yeah, David Fincher, who directed this movie and stuff like that, and talking about their work together and how, of course, they went on to do Gone Girl and some other stuff, and talking about other soundtracks of the era that had kind of been, you know, almost kind of ripped off of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross sound. I really like the way that they've composed and made the music for this. I think it even stands up with some of the other famous people who've made soundtracks like Hans Zimmer, even John Carpenter, even in a way. The way they use the electronics. There is definitely some grittier mixtures of piano and guitar in here that would be more suited to a Nine Inch Nails album. So to me, a lot of it is like a lost Nine Inch Nails album almost, or not lost, just placed differently. So really happy to get this. Like I said, obviously the movie's great. I can't wait to go back and rewatch the movie and hear how tense some of the parts get because of the music that was used. I have two more albums to talk about. First one we're going to talk about is the real downer of this pandemic. I think some of the stuff that's happening with music, but some of the stuff we can embrace. The Menzingers From Exile. And I do want to mention that this album is a limited indie store exclusive. So they actually did this on a limited pressing. Even during a pandemic, these guys were able to record this album, get it pressed, and even do limited versions of it, just for independent record stores. So it's really cool to see that even with all the upsetting stuff that's been going on in the world and the lack of being able to be social, social network, I guess we're through Facebook and social media, we are still being social, but not in the traditional sense, and not going out to see live music or having bands play your living room or your bar or your venue. So this album is, we call it a concept album or just a different way of making an album. This is in response to their album, Hello Exile, from 2019. They've actually re-recorded this, they've self-recorded it actually on their own, in exile, in isolation. In Philadelphia, must be their hometown. So they've actually redid their entire album in a much more isolated and stripped down version. I mean, it's kind of a downer. It's like Menzingers you would think of as more of like this just turned up pop punk having fun band. I love the album though, especially the second and third time through now. I've listened to it probably 4 times already. At first I was like, wow, Menzingers, where are you going with this? I mean, I liked it. It still has its melodies and stuff like that. But I think it's more proper of an album for them to make during the time we're going through. I mean, they were already asking, America, where did you go wrong and stuff on their last album. Obviously, even in Exile pre-pandemic, there were some strange things going on in the world and in this country. But yeah, I appreciate what they did here, and I think it makes much more sense to hear kind of a more tuned down, condensed, stripped down version of this album. Main place you're going to be listening to it, is either in your car, driving somewhere if you need to go somewhere, or sitting here at home, not with your friends, not hanging out and partying like some of their music does from their older albums. So I thought they did a really good job. At first I was thinking this is something I would hear from a group maybe more like Father John Misty or even maybe older Mumford & Sons or something. It was just such a strange sound if you go into it thinking it's a Menzingers regular album, because I actually didn't realize what they had done with this until I started listening to it. But I thought it was really interesting, and I think it just shows the perseverance of music and records and everything else, you know, that they're doing their part to keep music going, keep their fans something fresh to listen to by revamping their other album. I wanted to show this off in comparison with their other album. We actually sold out of Hello Exile, but we have more on the way in. So if you like what we're hearing, you know, what we're talking about, I mean, and some of the stuff we're going through, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a comment on what you think about what we're doing here or about any suggestions you might have for other shows. Lauren, you want to give me a hand? I want to bring in my special guest musician here, because opposite of Menzingers, there is a band that is really cranking up, turning up. Of course, with this Black and Bourbon I was talking about. Back in Black, one of my favorite top 10 albums of all time, believe it or not. Angus, dude, what's up, man? Welcome to Vinyl Happy Hour. Due to copyright and things like that, ACDC has not permitted him to be here in person. As you see, we got this really cool standout of him. So thanks so much for being here. I thought ACDC was down for the count, maybe, between Brian Johnson having health issues, things like that, but they are back and they are louder than ever with Power Up, their new album, and it rocks. I mean, ACDC, I think this is their 17th album, so it's kind of expensive. I was like, what's going to be in this? Is there a double LP? Is there posters or anything? There isn't. And it's just a nice, thick jacket, really glossy, as you can see, gatefold. And the recording is really awesome. I mean, they did a really good job. This is as classic as almost any AC/DC album. So it's like, well, how do you put a price on it? I mean, it's AC/DC. Who knew they were even going to put out? And they also put this on a really thick wax. This, at least 180 gram wax. But it's loud and rocking. They came through for us. They put out another good, loud, rocking party album. Good, heavy, sleazy rock. We do have just a limited for in-store. We do have a couple of posters even to give away. So mention that when you're in the shop. But I was surprised to see that they even put out an album, and it's with pretty much all the original lineup. Of course, sadly, one of the members has just passed away a few years ago. But in memory to him, they still contribute him as a contributing artist, I mean, on all the tracks. So that was pretty interesting, I thought. I was like, wow, AC/DC. To me, they're just as classic. They stand up with bands like Metallica, Black Sabbath, things like that. They've always made some really solid albums, just good rocking album. So yeah, I just wanted to show off a little bit of Power Up. I was like, wow, that's kind of an unexpected thing. I just thought the contrast in like what the Menzingers are doing, you know, as compared to what AC/DC is doing, just shows you that the music industry is still booming. There's still a lot going on, and people have a lot of hope for doing live music again in the near future, hopefully. But in the meantime, it's great that the record labels and everyone's working with record stores to get out great releases still. And even though things are a little bit slowed down, it's still happening, and we're still happening. We're spacing out people in our store and things like that, trying to get ready for the holidays. So we are still able to do it. Plus we can curbside pickups, and we can even ship things to you, which we're more than happy to do. Get a hold of us or hit up any of these releases. We'll have a link in the description of the video to cultureshockshop.com. But I hope you enjoyed checking out some records for the week with me. There's so many more records that we just got in the store, but we just wanted to highlight just a few of them. Thanks so much to Angus for being here with us, famous rock and roll musician. So until next week, please check out our other videos too, Vinyl Happy Hour, if you haven't already. We'll have another one next week for you. Cheers.